Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final installment of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce 2021 Federal Candidate Forum. I'm going to start by letting you know that today's session is being recorded and it will be posted to our website. We'd like to thank Rogers TV for recording the whole series, and each session will air or has aired on Rogers TV Channel 10 in the Fredericton region at 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. on the day following the recording. And all four of them will run twice consecutively on Saturday, beginning at 1 p.m. and again on 6 p.m. So I encourage you to check out Rogers' website for full details. Also, in order to facilitate the taping, we ask that you turn off your cameras. Thank you very much for that. My name is Krista Ross, and I am CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. So far this week, we have virtually hosted 3 of the candidates in the Fredericton riding, and today we are concluding our sessions with Jenica Atwin, the incumbent Liberal Party of Canada candidate. We really appreciate the participation of the candidates. We know their schedules are very full from morning until night, and especially this week as we approach the election on Monday. I'd also encourage everybody who's watching today to check out the set of federal business priorities that is a collaboration between the Chambers of Commerce of Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, the New Brunswick Business Council, the Conseil économique de Nouveau-Brunswick, and the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. The link for that website will appear in the chat. So today, I'm pleased to welcome Jenica Atwin, the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. And after I introduce Jenica, she's going to provide some opening comments, and then we will follow that with a Q&A. So we've had some members submit questions in advance. I'm also going to take questions from the chat box, and we're going to do our very best to get through as many of them as we can in the hour that we have today. I want to remind you that only Jenica and myself will have our mics unmuted during the forum today. So, Fredericton and Oromocto, that's Jenica's home. It's where she grew up. It's where she chooses to raise her children. And in October of 2019, she was elected as Fredericton's Member of Parliament, the first woman to hold this position. She got involved in politics because of her children and their future, because as a teacher at George Street Middle School, Ridgeview Middle School, FHS, and OHS, she saw firsthand the need for quality education, including childcare and mental health support. She ran because she believes there is no relationship more important than the relationship with First Nations, and we need to do more as a partner in reconciliation. She put her name forward because we are in a climate emergency, and we need to be doing everything we can to tackle climate change. The fight against COVID is not over, and Jenica wants to keep supporting small businesses, including in the hardest hit sectors like tourism, arts, and culture, to ensure that Canada's economy comes out of the pandemic stronger than ever. Without any further ado, I turn the mic over to you. Welcome, Jenica.
Well, thank you so much, Krista. Thank you, everyone, for joining today and for taking this time to really, again, look closely at your Fredericton candidates for the upcoming election. And I am your Liberal candidate this time around, so I'm sure there'll be some questions about that, and we can certainly get into it. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land that I speak to you from today is the unceded territory of the Wolastoq, the people of the beautiful, bountiful river, and it is an honor and a privilege to live, work, and learn here. This has been quite an incredible journey. For the last just under 2 years, I have been your Member of Parliament, and I thank you so much for giving me your trust in the 2019 election and for, allowing me to be your voice in the House of Commons. We had about 5 months of the regular parliamentary schedule, and then the world changed. And I have learned so much. And a big part of it has been working very closely with the Chamber, very closely with small businesses in our beautiful riding to learn about the challenges, the gaps, some of the ways that the supports from the federal government were able to help, some of the ways that it missed the mark, and we were able to reinforce and hopefully fill some of the cracks in the system. So it has been an incredible journey, and I think that's just a great place to start. Thank you again, Krista, for moderating today, and I look forward to the questions that I'll be receiving. And really, when I think about, talking to the business community. It's about, listening. It's about learning and advocating on your behalf, as I mentioned, but it's also because you are all the closest to the people and the constituents in this riding. You have to be responsive to their needs, to their wants, to the demands of the people, and you certainly have to adapt quickly. And that's very much what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, how quickly businesses were able to retool or to be creative about how to protect their customers, just how to be innovative in moving forward. And that's really what we need to harness in this time of transformation. As we hopefully get through the COVID-19 pandemic, we're also facing the climate crisis, and we have to be even more innovative in business practices to ensure that we look at ways to reduce our carbon footprints, that we look at ways to create perhaps net zero products. There's lots of ways that we can really join together and be unified in this approach to tackle some of the big problems that we see in our society. And the business community has a major role to play in that. I want to congratulate again the Chamber on all the work they did to support businesses throughout the Fredericton and greater Fredericton area during the COVID-19 pandemic, as far as information sharing, clarifying some of the pathways to, government subsidies and supports. I know there was such a big uptake for the wage subsidy program. So many people were impacted, obviously losing their jobs. So the CERB was there to help Canadians in need. And there has been some challenges. I know with a labor shortage, which we'll also, I'm sure, touch on through the question and answer period as well. There are solutions that exist. And that's why these forums are so important, because we need to know what we're dealing with. We need to include that Fredericton perspective, which is so key, which is what I've been taking with me to Ottawa again and again. They really know we have something special to offer here. And my commitment moving forward is to continue to be that loud, strong Fredericton voice and a New Brunswick voice. This is really about our province as well. And we've been making a splash in Ottawa. They're certainly paying close attention to us, including in this very tight race. So, I really ask for your support on September 20th. And I very much look forward to our conversation today. So thank you again for having me, and let's go for some questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your kind comments about the Chamber during especially those early days of the pandemic, when we were working really hard to interpret government policy and share it with our members. So I guess my first question is about a government policy and a government program that our members have seen utilized in the community. What is your party's plan with regards to CERB and the enhanced EI? Many of our members feel that the current programs seem to provide a disincentive to work, or a disincentive to return to work, and also creating a huge financial burden for taxpayers.
Well, thank you so much for this question. And I think I go back to when the CERB was originally passed, and I had the honor of being in that chamber, to reinforce that legislation and ensure we kind of perfected it. But we also knew it was about getting money in the hands of Canadians who needed it as fast as possible, and kind of working out some of those details as time progressed. And as we know, it did have a serious impact in positive ways, in that I've heard people say that it kept them alive, and also for businesses struggling now to get people to come back to work. This is a problem we're seeing all across the country, but we're particularly hard hit in the Maritimes, where we've already had a labor shortage before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. We also know it's an expensive, kind of big ticket item. We have to ensure that we're thinking about future generations as far as affordability, as far as the deficit goes, as far as future plans to balance the budget. So all of those things are certainly taken into consideration. I will say as well that as we face a fourth wave, which I'm not sure many of us predicted we would be in. I remember the days when we thought the second wave was just a potential scenario, but here we are in the fourth wave. So the government has committed to keeping certain measures in place as long as they are needed. We're a little luckier here, as we know, in New Brunswick, but we're still seeing some pretty high case numbers. So there does have to be something in place to protect workers who may be at risk of losing their positions because of COVID-19 impacts. The other piece, again, is just that we've had a labor shortage. We need to ensure that we're addressing this from multiple perspectives, because we need immigration. We need to ensure that we have many new community members joining our beautiful riding and working for different organizations, different companies. That's a big piece of this. So we also know that housing and healthcare are going to impact that as well. So there's many pieces. I think we can also have better partnerships with municipalities, with post-secondary institutions. I used to also work for a federal program called Skills Link, which was about really matching people with the right employment experience, because I've also had many people come into my office and say that they can't find work, that they've applied for 10 different positions or more and they haven't heard a word. So there's clearly a disconnect there, where we have some workers who are ready and willing, but just just can't find the right place. And then we have certainly lots of businesses who are struggling. I've heard, in some cases where people will come to work for 2-3 days and then not show up again. So something serious is happening. I do point to, sometimes wages need to be competitive, benefit packages need to be competitive, but we also know the bottom line of small businesses, it's really difficult to absorb those increases sometimes. So the federal government has to be a partner as we move forward, as well as the provincial government. So these are all moving pieces. I will say that the CERB is set to be, at latest November, it will come to an end, but it will lead into some changes to the EI system, because again, we know we need to have that social safety net to ensure people have what they need, that they can put a roof over their head and food in their bellies, but we've got to have workers as well. So this is the big challenge, I think, moving forward for our economy out of the COVID-19 pandemic. But again, it's multifaceted. It's going to take an all hands on deck approach from all levels of government. But just know that the Liberal Party is very aware of this issue. They've been hearing it across the country, and they're very responsive as well. So as your member of parliament, absolutely, we need to address this again from that multifaceted approach. Thank you.
Certainly balancing those two sides of the equation is important. And one of the statistics we recently saw was that there were just over 30,000 more people in New Brunswick collecting CERB or EI in June of this year than there were in June 2 years ago. So that has a pretty huge impact on employers trying to find people to come back and help them to, reinvigorate their business after such a difficult time. I want to ask you, I guess when I think about CERB and EI, I think about policies that perhaps are a blanket approach across the country. So, $2,000 in New Brunswick is very different than $2,000 in Vancouver. But that leads me to another question about sort of taking into account what the population looks like. I want to ask about healthcare. Given the exponential increase in health costs as people age, do you think the federal health transfer should be weighted to account for older provinces and aging demographics like here in New Brunswick?
Well, absolutely. And I just, this is something I've been advocating for, since I first got involved in even the provincial campaigns in 2019. We absolutely need more resources coming into the provinces, but it's got to be tied to our demographics. I think it's a smart way to do it as well, as far as looking at, tax-paying dollars and investments. So I really believe that here in the Atlantic, again, we have unique challenges. We have unique demographics, and it absolutely has to be tied to our aging population. We also have a lot of students, a lot of newcomers. It has to be there to respond to our needs. So it's something that I think there is a large appetite for. There are other parties advocating for kind of a no strings attached approach to these increased health transfer dollars. I tend to believe we need a bit more guidelines. We've had some failures in the past. I look at mental health, for example, something I'm extremely passionate about. We need to have specific funding earmarked for mental health in particular. So, we're going to see the federal government kind of reach in a little bit to some of the other jurisdictions, which, people have different opinions on, but I'll use long-term care as another example where we have, important lessons we learned out of this pandemic that we need to respond to, and we have to be ready to ensure that the mistakes that have been made never happen again. So absolutely, there's a plan for recruiting more physicians and nurses, empowering nurse practitioners, for example, expanding the scope of, say, what pharmacists do to help alleviate some of the issues we're seeing in our emergency rooms and those that don't have access to the primary care provider. So there is a huge push from all parties, which is very encouraging, to really overhaul what's happening in healthcare. But it will take a strong partnership with the provinces as well. And I think that's a piece we also need to work on, that regardless of party stripe, that we're working together to address these issues, because nothing else matters if we don't have a healthcare system that we can access. So that's a big, big piece of what I've been pushing for, is increasing those health transfer dollars, but ensuring it's based on demographics and with specific funding earmarked for our specific needs.
So when speaking of healthcare and mental health, one of the areas that is connected to that is homelessness. And those things, the homelessness or the health issues, tend to be the provincial responsibility in terms of healthcare. So would a Liberal government provide new funding and support for those groups that are mitigating homelessness and those who are trying to get out of homelessness?
So this is a great question, and it's what I'm hearing a lot at the doors as well. There is great concern in our city to alleviate this, this growing issue. We've known that our numbers of homelessness and high acuity individuals have grown exponentially over the last couple of years. And we know that while, we all want to lend our part and do what we can, that the business community is also particularly impacted because of, say, the downtown center. And we know we just want to do what's best for the human beings, but we also want to do what's best for our economy as well. So there's certainly a partnership that has to exist there. And I really want to push the federal government to ensure that municipalities have a lot more resources to address this issue, because there's been a lot of kind of finger pointing back and forth on whose jurisdiction this is. Used to be the federal jurisdiction. It was handed off to the provinces. The provinces tend to point fingers at municipalities as well. So again, all hands on deck. We need to do this. So there's lots of creative ways. I think we need flexibility in funding that comes through as well. The gas tax is a great example of how municipalities can have consistent funding that they can really be creative with to address their specific needs. Homelessness would fall into that category. There's also pieces as well about funding. So we need to ensure that we have more stock. That's a big issue. And we know that it will take encouraging developers as well to build affordable housing, which can be difficult to incentivize at times. But there's got to be a way for the federal government to help do that. So I know there's a commitment for 1.4 million new homes to be built. Again, I hope this is with an eye on environment, so that each one of those units will be incredibly environmentally sound and energy efficient. So those are big pieces that I'm pushing for. But it's also about supporting people in getting their first homes as well. So it's doubling the first-time home buyers tax credit, which is really important. It's putting more money actually directly in the pocket of home purchasers. Permanently increasing funding to the National Housing Co-Investment Fund as well, which is $2.7 billion over 4 years is the commitment. Introducing a tax-free first home savings account. So that's another big piece to encourage young people to be able to do it. Protecting renters' rights as well. This is a big issue in Fredericton in particular. We have an extremely low vacancy rate. We also know that there's renovictions that are happening. So there needs to be protections, but again, we need our provincial partners to really be at the table for that piece. Taking action against speculators. There's a piece in here about looking at flipping homes. I know that it can be a great business venture, but it's also increasing, some of the inflation that we're seeing in housing prices. So, again, across party lines, we're seeing a real commitment towards addressing housing and homelessness in particular. But a big piece for me is empowering the municipality, and they need the funds to be able to do that.
So you mentioned a couple of initiatives like doubling the tax credit and the tax-free first savings account and so on. What about things like relaxing the mortgage stress test or restoring the 30-year insured mortgages?
So, there's nothing specific to that, I think, in the platform, but absolutely. We hear a lot about the stress test, and it's been discussed a lot in the last few years. And then as COVID kind of changed the game, absolutely, there's an appetite to look at those formulas and configurations and ensure that they are meeting the needs of, again, young, first-time home buyers and those who have been in the market for quite some time that are feeling the pinch. So absolutely, there's a commitment to relook at those as well.
So you mentioned that in your platform, there are 1.4 million new homes. So what is the actual plan? Like, what is the mechanic by which you will increase affordable housing to the tune of 1.4 million new homes?
Well, and excellent question. And I think that's some of the big things that we're going to see moving out of this election period is that there's lots of promises being made and lots of commitments, but we want to see the roadmap on how we can get there. And again, when I talked about kind of all parties being on side with this, I'm really hopeful that we'll convene perhaps a parliamentary debate on how this moves forward. We'll have, expert testimony and witnesses come into committee, and we'll come up with something really solid that's going to reflect the needs that were from real Canadians across the country. So I think that's really where we're going to see most of those details. And again, I want to push for environmentally friendly and energy, efficient homes as well. So I think there's got to be a lot of conversation about how those kinds of programs roll out. Not a ton of details at the moment, but it's going to be a huge priority when we get back to Ottawa.
Certainly one of the areas that we've seen challenges with regards to housing is with our newcomer community and our newcomer entrepreneurs. And I want to ask you a couple of questions with regards to immigration. First of all, we have been told that we have a lower retention rate than what we would hope for entrepreneurial immigrants. And we do know that the province leads that immigration file for New Brunswick, but as our MP, how would you work with the province to make sure that we're supporting those immigrant investors?
Well, that's a great question. And again, it's about partnerships. And I think that I remember a lot of conversations I was having even back in 2019 with newcomers to the city, that there's lots of challenges. Housing is a big one. Also housing that's accessible. Anyone living with a disability, that's not always included. Larger families, many families come with many children, and it's not easy to find housing that's, going to fit their needs as well. Healthcare is a big concern. Many people leave because we don't have access to, primary healthcare providers, and they may come with an existing condition. As many would. So those are some of the key issues I hear around housing and healthcare in particular, but there's also issues around, racism. It's an issue that I've heard many times. We look at Dune Street, there has been some changes there, and there has been some improvements, but it's a common experience that many people are bringing to my attention. And that, even though they love it here, they love what we have to offer, that they'll have to go to a bigger city center where they feel more of a sense of community. So that's a big piece of it, is truly being a welcoming environment. And as a member of parliament, it's about ensuring that anywhere that I go, that I'm making sure that we're honoring and speaking to and recognizing newcomers and their needs and their families' needs. And I think that's going to go a long way as far as, again, that retention piece. We also need things in our beautiful city, like the Playhouse, like the pool, like the resiliency center that's planned for the north side. These are major, not only attractions, but it's something to keep people there and, again, grow that sense of community. So I think that's the really big piece, but we also need economic opportunities. We need people to be able to have their credentials recognized. There's a big piece there with working with provinces to ensure it's kind of a streamlined, smooth process, because we're not wasting any of the talent pool that's coming here. Those stories are real, where people come, even healthcare in particular. We can't waste anyone with healthcare skills, but it happens, and it happens far too often. So again, it's kind of a multifaceted issue, but it's working with our partners. The Multicultural Association does incredible work. The settlement associations that they work with, people are coming out of their silos. And I think that's a big piece of it as well. We have to work together. We can't be duplicating efforts. We can't have, gaps in the services that are provided. So there's lots of ways for a member of parliament to be an excellent partner in that process.
One of the areas that our chamber has advocated is with regards to welcoming, supporting newcomer students or international students at our universities. And we've talked a lot about and advocated to the federal government about making some changes to how those students are able to participate in the workforce here. We have advocated that they should be able to qualify for Canada Summer Jobs programs and student work placement programs. We've advocated that they should be able to participate in voluntary co-op work terms and internships without having to get a separate and special work permit. We've advocated that international students should be allowed to work more than 20 hours per week off campus on a permanent basis. Now, that was made a temporary COVID measure, but it needs to be something that's permanent. So what would your party do about making changes in those areas?
Well, thank you. And I know that these are some of the questions that we've been grappling with over the last 2 years. And I feel, again, I'm coming from a new team perspective, and I'm really hopeful that I'll be able to have that direct relationship with the minister and the minister's department on some of the flexibility that needs to be, infused into the system. And I absolutely support international students being able to do the Canada Summer Jobs program, be part of the co-op programs, and certainly be able to work more than 20 hours. Newcomers or international students are often families or parents as well. We have this idea of what an international student is. People often think, always coming from money, for example, but you want to come here and you want to be able to work and not have such restrictions placed on you. So that's a big piece of it. Also having, streamlined processes towards permanent residency and hopefully, again, citizenship and retention in our area. So many pieces here. And a lot of it really came out when we had a roundtable discussion at the University of New Brunswick, and Minister Mendicino came to talk. And I saw that there was a willingness to be more flexible, to listen to these concerns and to, take it back to the department. And they're also looking at new software programs as well to kind of speed up some of the wait times and the backlog that we know is extremely frustrating. And again, through the COVID experience, we did see some of that flexibility where there were some changes made. I'm hoping to see that really change moving forward in a permanent fashion. So again, lots of the lessons learned. I know international students as well. Some were, stuck in limbo for quite some time. And I just can't imagine the extra stress and anxiety that would have caused. So I'm very concerned about also the mental health of international students and having access to those kinds of services here. So such an important issue. And, we rely so much on international students here in the Fredericton area and our post-secondary institutions. So we absolutely have to start accommodating and catering and incentivizing and just showing them how special that they are to us. So big pieces there. You have my full support.
So the Atlantic immigration pilot is becoming permanent now. Do you think it should be expanded? Can we settle more newcomers? How do you see that rolling out?
Well, so I'm very happy to learn that it's a permanent program now, which is really exciting. And I do think it needs to be expanded. So we had an immigration roundtable, I think it was last week, and, that really talks about increasing the number to about 10,000, newcomers per year. And so this is it's very bold, I think, but it's something that we need to look at. But again, it's the housing and healthcare piece that have to be there to really bump up those numbers. So I think that it's going to take some time for us to be able to get to that number if we really want that retention piece. Because it's not just about recruiting people to come. We have to make sure that they want to stay and that their needs are going to be met. So absolutely, I support expanding it. But we need to have more partners at the table to ensure that the environment, once you're received here, is going to be conducive to, setting up shop and joining the community for the long haul.
Speaking of expanding programs, one program that we think needs to be expanded is with regards to R&D funding from the federal government. New Brunswick receives about 43% less R&D funding versus the national average. How will you close that gap?
Well, we know that the Fredericton area relies so much on research and development. It's also key for that transition into the future when we're looking at how environment and economy go hand in hand as well. We really want to, again, see that innovation and retooling for all businesses across sectors to do what they can to bring down their carbon footprints, to be more responsible stewards of the environment. So we have to have research and development well funded. I think that we've been pretty lucky as far as UNB goes in particular, but always can be expanded. And I know that, some people will say that things have been studied to death or we don't need to do more research, but we absolutely always have to do more research. I come from a research background, so I know how critical it is and how fast things can change. I can't wait to see all of the data that's coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic experience for all sectors as well. So it's going to be about being a strong voice and ensuring that the needs that we have are heard in Ottawa. They do know we have unique challenges in the Atlantic that we absolutely need to study more, and we have to develop and grow and respond to those needs. So strong voice, which is always my commitment. And I've shown that over the last 2 years. And I just want the opportunity to continue to show that. I just wanted to correct myself. I said 10,000 per year, but that's by 2024 for immigration growth. Just wanted to clarify.
We were going to write that down and hold you to it.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat with regards to some things we've already talked about, but just a little bit of clarification. So the Liberal platform talks about adding 1.4 million homes in Canada, which we talked about. What role will the other levels of government play with that commitment? And are you confident New Brunswick will receive its fair share of that support and those homes?
Well, it's always my commitment to ensure that New Brunswick receives its fair share. That's one of the things I got involved with politics for, is because we're often forgotten about. We exist beyond Quebec is always my kind of line of explanation. And it's just, we have to be heard. We have to have strong, effective voices. And I've built partnerships with, for example, with Dominique Leblanc, someone who's another strong voice for the province. So I'm confident that they're aware that, we're here and we have needs as well. And so absolutely, we need to have our fair share. And I'll ensure, through any means necessary, that will happen. The other piece is, yes, of course, we need the provinces to be on side. I know we've seen some investments that have been put forward, say through infrastructure or transportation, where our province hasn't quite, taken it to the full advantage of that funding, and we've left some money on the table. So we don't want that to happen with, housing stock. Again, we know how critical it is. So we're going to have to build those partnerships. We're going to have to ensure that there's clear communication, that we have the same goals. We want everyone to be successful. We want them to have housing and homes that they can count on. So I think it's just about being a better partner on the federal side. And I've been working to really build those relationships over the last 2 years, and I will continue to do that because we have to be there together. As I said, it's multifaceted, it's multi-levels of government. The municipalities obviously have a huge role to play as well. I'd love to see them actually getting even municipal nominee programs, speaking of immigration as well, but also in the housing, they're the closest to the citizens, just like businesses are. And so their voice has to be heard. So it's about working together.
So, pardon me, I've had a couple of questions come in with regards to labor force. The Liberal platform promises to raise PSW wages to $25 per hour. How would the federal government accomplish this given provincial jurisdictional issues? What effect would that have on wages for other healthcare workers? For example, that's a higher amount than the average LPNs in New Brunswick are currently paid.
Yeah, so I really like to see anytime we talk about increasing wages, I think it's high time that we do that. But I do know that, reaching into different jurisdictions is kind of tricky, especially again, when across the country, money means different things, say in British Columbia than it does here in the Atlantic. So I think that when we put kind of a blanket number on things, it's going to bring questions just like this. I'd like to see our LPNs paid more as well. I think it's so important, especially in the healthcare field. But in particular, I think the reason why they chose personal support workers is because of, again, the lessons we learned out of COVID-19. Personal support workers are going to have a massive role to play as we move forward, specifically here in the Atlantic as well, in helping the aging population and working in long-term care homes. But they're going to have other needs, as things change and as new pandemics, for example, potentially arise. So I think it's important that we do put an emphasis on the personal support workers because it's kind of a sector that, we haven't given a lot of attention to. And I think it's important now that we show that the lessons have been learned and that we compensate accordingly. Whether or not that number will change, I think we'll have yet to see that. But if it does impact other healthcare, rates, I think that's a good thing. It's going to have impacts felt throughout our society, but I think it's high time that we listen. We've seen obviously some of the demands of CUPE members. We've seen how workers have been mistreated throughout the COVID-19 pandemic experience, those frontline workers who kept us safe and sound. So I think it's high time. That might be a little bit of my previous Green Party experience coming back with me, but this is something I really fight for is higher wages across the board. So that's, we'll have to see how the details pan out, but I'm supportive of it.
So another question about workforce, industries like retail, tourism, hospitality, they're actually having trouble attracting workers like never before. And they're in a fragile situation in terms of the economy and their financial viability. So how can we boost the available workforce in New Brunswick, in particular for those industries?
Well, that's the age-old question. As I said, we've been grappling with this issue even before the COVID-19 pandemic. I think I'll turn to a conversation I had this week with forestry here in the city. And, it's an incredible sector that serves New Brunswick in such an important way. And they're also struggling with, a labor shortage. And they're talking about partnerships, again, with post-secondary institutions and ensuring that, needs are being met, that information is being shared to youth or to anyone who's looking for a prospective job. Again, that goes to newcomers and recruitment and what kind of skills that we need. So I think that's a big piece. It's improved partnerships, improved communication. Everyone has to get out of their silos and start working together. And I think I have a lot of skills in doing that in bridge building. So, it's the big question moving forward is we have big, bold plans for the economy to recover, big, bold plans to transform and shift to perhaps, a greener economy and transition away from some of our more traditional methods of revenue. But it has to be done. So it's going to take everybody. It's going to be tough. No one said it was going to be easy, but we have to show people that we need them to work, but we also want them to have meaningful work where they feel like they can stay for a long time in a sustainable field and feel good about what they're doing to contribute to our economy. So, it's not an easy answer for sure, but I think we're all committed to doing the work.
I have another question that's come in through the chat, and it's related to housing. And a previous conversation we were having. Jenica, what were your party's thoughts behind the announcement of banning blind bidding and other restrictions that you'd like to put in place when selling and purchasing homes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wasn't involved a lot in the platform creation process, but I do know they were looking at ways to address the way that the market has just been in such flux for such some time, and it's very much out of reach for so many people. So I know that blind bidding is actually, it lends itself to a lot of the foreign market investments that we're seeing, especially in say British Columbia, for example, and they're really trying to cut down on that. They want Canadians to have, the access first and foremost. So there's a piece to that. I mentioned as well, perhaps an extra tax on flipping houses, which is going to kind of go hand in hand to this. So it's just about trying to protect people, trying to keep prices down and ensure that it's a more predictable market moving forward, because right now it's not predictable and it's been really difficult. I know so many of my neighbors put their houses up for sale in this kind of boom that we saw, but there's nowhere for them to go. So it's we're in a tricky spot right now, and I think this is just a way to try to address it. But we're going to have to see this as far as legislative changes, and we're going to have to debate this in the House and ensure it meets everybody's needs.
So another question that's come in with regards to housing: what policies would your party implement to help residential and commercial property owners to green both their new and existing housing stocks?
Yeah, so again, it's a huge piece about our future energy plans is about understanding what our needs are right now. And I think anytime we're building new homes, new stock, we absolutely have to have that lens and ensuring that we're using as minimal energy as possible, using sustainable products when we build houses, but it's also in retrofitting those that already exist. And I would include commercial buildings in that. I think that's the best way to get people back to work as well. It's the best way to really promote this transition to a new greener economy. So this is a boom time, and I think we should take advantage of it. So it's just about putting measures in place. It's about incentivizing, ensuring that, again, we're as energy efficient as possible, because then we can have a real idea of what our needs are moving forward. So that's a huge, huge plan that has been talked about for years now. So it's about incentivizing, putting in different credits and different measures to ensure that people, want to, and they have the funds and resources to make those changes. But I think it's something we're going to need to see on a larger scale across the country. And again, willingness on all parties to do that. So collaboration is key, but that's a big piece in making sure that it's incentivized.
So speaking of green initiatives, what actions do you advocate to address climate change? How do you plan to reduce carbon emissions in the next 5 to 10 years while still keeping the economy healthy? What actions are you advocating to help both businesses and communities adapt to changing climate?
Well, so a good segue from our last piece as well. So a big piece, I think, is what we do personally in our lifestyle changes in our home. So there is $40,000 that can be offered for homeowners for deep retrofits to ensure that they're meeting their own needs and challenges. But there's so many things. And again, I see this as a boom opportunity for our economy that also makes a sustainable environment moving forward and thinking about 7 generations ahead. So there's lots of pieces. Just transition legislation is something that's been promised. So again, we need to ensure that we have the regulatory framework to moving forward, and that it's very clear about how this is going to impact, all sectors. Accelerating major public transit projects. I think that's something I'm super excited about. It's something most people maybe not know about me, but I love trains. I love high-speed rail. I think that's it was our past and it should be the way of the future. So that's a big piece. Advancing a national active transportation strategy. So really transforming our cities to be more responsive as well, be more about pedestrians and cyclists and less about our cars, which are the big GHG polluters as well. Continuing to work with partners to ensure Canada meets its goals to conserve 25% of our lands and waters by 2025 and 30% by 2030. There are economic opportunities in that as well. There's a commitment to make more national parks, urban national parks as well, protect more marine coastlines. Again, there's economic opportunities in doing that. So I think this is a time we can be really proud of the next steps ahead and what we can do in the business community, on our personal, lifestyle choices as well as the role of government at all levels to make some of these really big changes. So of course, again, it's the commitment to reduce our GHG emissions by 40 to 45%, which is, I think, ambitious, which I'm very happy to see, but I would even push it further. So I, again, want to be that really strong voice for Fredericton, for New Brunswick, in Ottawa, with, a passion for the environment and ensuring that that's informing every decision that we make moving forward.
I appreciate your passion for public transit, for trains, that sort of thing. But provinces like New Brunswick that are more rural, and we have fewer ways to mitigate the fossil fuel use like public transit, should policies like the Clean Fuel Standard be tailored for us rather than a national one-size-fits-all approach?
Yes. And so, I'm a big fan of national standards because I think, again, oftentimes we don't see great partnerships, with provinces. So that's what's kind of what they're there for. But again, in the Atlantic, and having this perspective that we have unique challenges, and there's going to be unique challenges across the country, that absolutely with the clean fuel standard, we need to look at specific needs. Small cities are often locked out of things like, specific transportation funding, which we've seen. Moncton may get it, but Fredericton may not. So, I think that we need to be looking at everything we've done in the past and apply a brand new lens as far as the post-COVID lens, as far as the climate crisis lens, and ensure we're also applying the smaller cities, rural lens, Indigenous lens. And we're seeing a willingness to do that. So it's, again, some of those strong lessons that have come out of this pandemic, but I absolutely agree that, clean fuel standard as an example needs to be tailored to smaller cities, to smaller needs, and certainly rural communities as well.
Here's an interesting question that's come in through the chat. Will the promised $1 billion proof of vaccination fund help provinces like New Brunswick that are moving ahead, announced yesterday, with these types of policies?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great piece that the federal government wants to foot the bill for this. I think it's important that they play that role in a partnership, and nice to see that New Brunswick has really, decided that this is a priority. I think that the vaccine passports or the immunization records, depending on the language that you want to use, I think it's a good thing. I think that it shows that, again, the government has a role to play. So it's not, the burden isn't placed on individual businesses, for example, that they have to be the ones to kind of do the policing or ensure that their public health measures are being followed so that their patrons can have the safest experience possible in pubs, restaurants, whatever you want to do. So I think it's important that we're doing this. And I'm really proud of the federal government for stepping up and putting the money forward for it. And it's going to be, a challenge for the next little bit as we see how it unrolls. I know here it's September 21st, so day after election. But we have to, again, we are a community. We need to be united in this. We need to finish the fight against COVID-19. It's the best thing we can do for businesses and the economy across the country, and also right here at home in New Brunswick.
So one of the measures that the previous government had put into play was the $10 per day childcare plan. Do you think that's been put in jeopardy with the election call?
I don't actually, because, there's been 8 agreements signed with provinces already, which is a really encouraging sign. I know New Brunswick's getting closer. I really want to encourage them to sign on as well. This is another one of the biggest things we can do to protect our economy. They say for every $1 you put into early childhood education, you receive $3 in return as far as, economic growth and stimulation, and having women part of the workforce, young family members who were the most impacted by the COVID pandemic. We saw women leave the workforce in the highest numbers, in decades. So this is a critical piece. Childcare, again, the more affordable it is, the more money families are going to have in their pockets to spend at all your wonderful businesses. And I think that's an important piece to consider as well. And I just think it's high time that we do this. It's really about a feminist recovery as well, if I can use that lens. I think it's a really important thing, and I'm very excited by it. And I'm excited to see that, again, 8 provinces and territories have stepped up to be a partner in this, and we're going to see it happen. I really don't think that the election has kind of been a stumbling block. If anything, it's just allowed us to just explain why it's so important and to really get more people enthusiastic about it.
You talk about the economic viability and economic recovery of small businesses. And of course, that's something that's close to my heart, given that that's one of the missions and visions of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. But with many people continuing to work virtually, downtowns across the country are really struggling to recover from the pandemic and from the public health restrictions that have been put in place for the last 18 months. So what role can the federal government play to help ensure the economic viability of our downtowns?
That's a really great question. And, it makes me think of even Ottawa, for example, when traveling during the pandemic. So many of the public servants were, working from home, and people would even go back to their, respective provinces and territories. And it felt like a ghost town. And so many of the businesses were struggling. And gyms, spas, salons, restaurants, it impacts kind of everyone, when there's such a big challenge like this. So I think, again, it's just about in finishing the fight against COVID. We have to get everyone vaccinated. We have to ensure there's rules, across sectors that everyone has to follow so that we can take the take this pressure and stress off of some of those local big businesses. But I love some of the initiatives that we see in partnerships, say with Chamber of Commerce here in Fredericton or in Armukto, where there's incentives to go downtown, like the downtown dollars, or different programs or reward systems, and just about celebrating what we have. And I think downtowns really represent the heart of a city. It's just a different feeling and a different energy. And I just think that there's lots of ways we can do promotional activities as well, but just again talking about it a lot as the federal government, and being a partner with municipalities, because again they are the ones who are kind of the gatekeeper in a lot of ways to what happens in downtown centers. And so I think that's a big piece. And I met with the city recently and we talked a lot about that in particular. So not I would say a direct specific role, but I think it's more about partnerships and role modeling and being a leader.
So hopefully those activities will help us to get people back to their desk and not working virtually. But that being said, we do have a high quality of life here in New Brunswick. And I think we have an opportunity to attract remote workers from across the globe. So those that are still working virtually could do their work here as well. What could the federal government do to help leverage that opportunity for this region?
Well, I think we've already seen there was a willingness to give specific, tax rebates for those who are working from home and some of the equipment that they might need to set up their home offices. Just general celebration of, again, how everyone was able to quickly adapt and change their routines. And for some of us, it's particularly difficult to work at home, when our kiddos were home. So that's the other childcare piece. And we need, healthy schools. Our kids can be there so we can work from home. So that's a big piece of it as well. And I think that, we're going to moving forward. This is something that's here to stay. I hope that even the virtual hybrid model of Parliament is here to stay. It's a way for lots of businesses and companies to cut costs in a lot of ways as well. So it can be leaner, meaner, and more productive and effective in their different strategies and approaches and growth. So this is, again, that time of growth. So we need to harness that. So here in the Atlantic, I think we do have a very unique opportunity. I've seen it already, some transition, just some of my friends and colleagues who have really, you could be working for, in a Silicon Valley company in California, but you can live here in Fredericton and be a big part of that. So I also look to the entertainment industry. I think that there's so much growth to be had there. We have so many creative, amazing, talented, artistic people in our region that now they have the whole wide world, as a potential market. So I just think it's about putting supports there, ensuring that there are things like tax rebates or incentives, and again, the partnerships. So that's a word you're going to hear a lot from me.
Jenica, I'm going to ask you one last question. We've got about 10 minutes left. So this is a three-part question. So, and then I'm going to turn the floor to you and let you have the last word. So the question is, what is your party's plans for pandemic spending in the short term? What federal supports do you think will be needed for economic recovery in the medium term? And finally, how will your party then manage the growing debt and deficit in the long term?
Well, so this is such an important question. I know it's on the minds of so many Canadians. It's come up a lot in this election campaign. I think for the short term, it's still about ensuring that we have all the tools we need to get past COVID-19. So there's not going to be a lot of, holding back at the time. I think this is a time for investment and the time for stimulus, across the board. So I think that's the first big plan, is that we're, Chrystia Freeland is our first female finance minister as well. I really trust her at the helm to ensure that we're meeting the needs of Canadians, and that, again, we do have an eye on the cost. So that's a big piece. Medium, again, so moving forward, it's going to be kind of about closing the doors a little bit. I've had certain conversations with different ministers and different members of Parliament where they say, this is the time to get your project proposals in. This is the time to get your big requests, your big ticket items, because there's an acute awareness that this has been extremely expensive. It's been extremely taxing for our economy. And of course, that deficit, nobody likes to see that number of $1 trillion. So there's got to be a lot of ways that we can address this. We do still have an excellent, AAA credit rating, which is good, but we need to make sure that it stays there. So really the answer is that This is still the time for stimulus and investment, but in very strategic ways, because we want to make sure that that transition happens so we can get to the next stage where we're going to have to tighten up. We're going to have to be a lot more careful about how we're spending money. But hopefully, if we have done things right in the short term and the medium term, that we're going to come out of this strong and we'll have a great fiscal projection moving forward.
Thank you for that, Jenica. I appreciate that answer and all the answers that you've given us today. And I am going to turn the mic over to you for the last word, and then we'll conclude with a bit of a thank you. So over to you.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. This is kind of like a rapid fire of questions here. And, I feel like anytime I've had meetings, with the chamber, which have been many, again, thank you so much for your support over the last 2 years, because, my background is in, education, social justice. These are the lenses that I always apply, but it's always important to have a business lens and an economic lens as well. And so I relied so much on the advice of the experts, of the people who have this lived experience. And that's really my approach with any issue. We think about healthcare. This is the number one thing I'm hearing at the doors. It's the number one thing that I think that impacts all of us across the board, is specifically our economy and this recovery period. And it's about listening and empowering those voices. The solutions exist. I will say that everything that I've experienced over the last 2 years, which has been quite a lot, it's been quite a journey, but I'm more optimistic than ever. I haven't become cynical. It hasn't been kind of beaten out of me that I believe in hope and optimism. I absolutely know that the solutions exist, and that with the right people in the right places, we can get there together. So I think that's something to keep in mind. We've all been in kind of a dark place for quite some time now. Again, I mentioned mental health is something that I'm really passionate about. I think we need some hope. I think we need to look to realistic things that we can do to make some of these grandiose changes that we need during this time of transition. And I know that we can do that together. So I'm firmly committed to working, again, across party lines, all levels of government, all hands on deck, all sectors, private, public. We need to do this together. And what I've seen as well in this election campaign and talking to you at your doors, we've knocked on over 13,000 doors at this point. It's really that willingness and the desire to see collaboration. And oftentimes our politics can get pretty negative. If you've ever watched Question Period, it's a bit like a high school cafeteria at times. But what I've used is my education skills to kind of really try to be a bridge builder and bring people together, because there's no way that one single person is going to tackle all of these complicated issues. I haven't had a perfect answer probably for everything that I've been asked today, but it's about the willingness to try, the willingness to work together, and the willingness to listen and learn along the way. And that's always been my commitment. And I really feel that I've demonstrated that. And even on a new team. So I'm surprised that hasn't come up. It's come up a lot over this election period, which of course, those questions are so important. For me, it's about delivering. It's always been about delivering for Fredericton. And, now for me, it's only more urgent that we do that, because so much has changed since 2019. The climate crisis has worsened. The economic forecast, we're doing pretty good, but we know we need to make some really important steps moving forward to ensure we have a sustainable future that we can rely on. So all of these things are more important to me than they were even in 2019, because again, I am a mom. I've got 2 little boys. I was a teacher. I had so many students across the city and across the greater Fredericton area that I care so deeply about, because it's their future that we're planning right now. It's their future that we're talking about. So that is what grounds me. That's what inspires me. That's what keeps me moving forward every day on your behalf. And as I said before, it has absolutely been an honor and a privilege to be a member of Parliament. And I don't do anything kind of the traditional way. That's my way, is to do things kind of differently. And you know what? I'll keep doing that. I think that this is a time to be different and to be innovative and creative. And that's all I want to do. Deliver for Fredericton and meet your needs when and where you need them. So thank you again for this amazing opportunity. Incredible questions. Keep them coming. If anything wasn't answered, please feel free to contact me anytime at our campaign office here. Or you can call our numbers 300-7710. Happy to chat anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jenica. We really appreciate your time today and your thoughtful and considered answers. I know it is a busy time, so taking the time out to participate in this Q&A is really important. And as I mentioned to all of you who are watching and those of you joining us on the virtual call today, this will be on our website and also televised through Rogers. You can check out their website. It'll be on there tomorrow and again on Saturday at 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. We'll be running all 4 of the sessions that we held. So I thank Jenica today, and I thank the other 3 candidates that participated in our series this week as well, and for everyone who puts their name forward to represent any community. It's a big commitment to run, and we appreciate that. So of course, I remind everyone too, don't forget to get out and vote sometime between now and the 20th. And thanks very much for participating in the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce Candidate Forum Series. Thanks very much.